All right, we'll say good morning. Good morning. The shir is dedicated this morning by Milt and Melanie Gertner in commemoration of the yard site today of Milt's father, Gilbert Gertner, Getzel ben Avram. We hope that in the merit of our Talmud Torah, and Shalom will have an aliyah, the family in the Kamma. And also by Rabbi and Rebbetzin Miller, the schus of a refuah shlema for Yitzchak Avram ben Miriam, Chaim Yaakov David ben Abigail, and Yitzchak Isaac ben Rus. We hope that in the merit of our Talmud Torah, these cholim together at Kol Choli Yisrael have an ongoing refuah. Amen. So also let's begin. A lot to do today. Yes, a lot to do. But hopefully you did your homework, so it's a little bit less. So we're picking up 9 lines. I'm not taking a poll over here. Whenever I ask that, everybody starts to look in the Gemara immediately. Amazing. So it says, we're picking up 9 lines up from the bottom. 2, 4, 6, 8, 11 lines up from the bottom. Amar Rav Sheshes. So it's an interesting sugya to begin with today. So Rav Sheshes says the following. HaKofer bePikadon na'aseh alav gazlan v'chai ba'onsim. So Rav Sheshes said, it's supposed to say, if somebody has a Pikadon, so remember again, the case of Pikadon is, I give Ruvain an object to watch, and what happens? I come back to reclaim the object, and Ruvain says, I don't have it. So Rav Sheshes says that from the moment that one more piece, and then Eidim come along and say that Ruvain does have the Pikadon. Ruvain does have it. So the halacha is that from the moment that Ruvain went ahead and denied that he had the Pikadon, he became a gazlan, he became a thief. And Abu said the ramification of becoming a thief is he's chayiv for onsim. He is chayiv for any extenuating circumstance or any extenuating things that may occur to the Pikadon. So opposed to it when he was a shomer, so remember again, shmira, depending on what type of shomer he is, he has capped liability, depending on the nature of shmira. Once he becomes a gazlan, he is chayiv for all extenuating circumstances. Rashi says over here, na'asal of gazlan, it's the last short line in Rashi, mishas kfira, from the time that he denied that he had the item in his possession, va'afa pi shelo nishpa. The Rabbi saying that the chap, according to Rav Sheshes, is he's chayiv on onsin, even though what? He has not sweared falsely. So even though he has not taken a false oath, because in this case he didn't swear, he's just simply denying responsibility. From the moment that he denies it, he is responsible ultimately again with onsin. The Tanatun, the Brisa that supports this, the pasuk says he denied that he had the object. Lamadnu onesh. This teaches us the punishment. As Haribin again, you generally know that for every prohibition in the Torah, there are generally 2 sources. There's one source for the lav, for the prohibition, and one source for the onesh. So the Kicheshba teaches us that ultimately, again, from the moment that a shomer denies that he has an object, so he is responsible. That's the onesh, and that he's responsible ultimately for own sin. As Haribin, where's the lav? Talmud lomar lo sichachashu. My lav lo onesh mammon. Are we not talking about, again, that he is financially responsible? Lo, the onesh shvua. Ultimately, we'll say what it teaches us. Look at Rashi for just a moment. Lav lo, the onesh shvua. Hai onesh da anshe krolis chayiv onsim, mishum shvua shekerhi. About ilo ishtabalos. Well, says the Gemara, but 1 second, from that pasuk only teaches me that from the moment that a shomer swears falsely that he has the object, that he doesn't have the object, when in fact he does have the object, from that moment and on, he is going to be responsible. He is going to be responsible for onsim. But it doesn't teach us anything ultimately afterwards about, or I should say, it doesn't teach us anything lemaisa again about if he didn't take a shvua, to which the Gemara says, Hamid Iktani Seifa V'ishtaba. But 1 second, from the fact that the Seifa says that he took an oath, Michlal Dereisha Delo Ishtaba. Yet we can infer from that the Reisha is talking about a case, we'll say where he did not take an oath. So remember, the Gemara is trying to figure out the following. Rav Sheshes made a statement, and in Rav Sheshes' statement, Rav Sheshes is saying that if Ruvain is holding onto a Pikadon, and then I come to reclaim my Pikadon from Ruvain, and Ruvain says I don't have it, from the moment that Ruvain denies that he has the object, he is chayiv in onsin. All the Gemara is just pointing out is, from the Brisa, it sounds like the only time Reuven becomes chayiv in onsin is when? Is after he swears that he doesn't have it. After he swears he doesn't have it, then Lamais is going to be chayiv in onsin from that point in time. So Gemara is trying to reconcile this contradiction. So the Gemara says, but the Tani Seifa, V'nishpa al sheker, Lamadnu onish, because remember we learned in the Sefer, the pasuk says he swore falsely, so that teaches us the punishment. As harabinan, from where do we know the law? Talmud lomar lo sishakru, don't lie. Umid the Sefer dishtaba, and from the fact that the Sefer is dealing with a case of where he swore falsely, reisha de lo ishtaba. Ultimately, you have to, the Reisha is talking about a case where he did not swear falsely, to which the Gemara says, Amri idi v'idi dishtaba. No, both cases are talking about where he swore falsely. Kan shahoda, kan shahoda, kan shaba'u edim. Both say, so now the Gemara is suggesting over here that both cases are talking about where he swore falsely. One is a case of where he admitted his responsibility, and the kan shaba'u edim. And one is talking about a case where witnesses came and ultimately showed that he lied. Asu edim chayiv ba'onsin. So we'll say if witnesses come and disprove his claim and say that lamaisa again he did have the object, he will be chayiv in onsin. Ad oduye ude chayiv bekeren bechomesh va'asham. If he admits on his own, then lamaisa again. If he admits on his own, he'll be chayiv ultimately. If he admits on his own after he swore falsely, he'll be chayiv in the keren, chomesh, and asham. Fine. So we'll say. So what we're coming out from over here so far, just keep in mind, is Rav Sheshes' statement. So Rav Sheshes says that if you're kofar bepikadon, if you go ahead and you you deny, that you are in possession of the pikadon, and what, and then you deny that you are in possession of the pikadon, you become a gazlan from the moment that you deny it, even though you have not sworn falsely, and you are chayiv for all onsin from the moment of your denial. Hold on to that. Says the Gemara, Maser Rami Bar Kamma. Sarah Macham raised the kasha. Shekinegdo chashad al shul case. So this is a very interesting case. This, if you look at Rashi says Shekinegdo chashud b'mesechah shvuas gabi ve'elu nishba'in v'notlin tezeh echad mehen mi shahayalo chaveiro chayiv shvua v'chashad al shvua. So listen to the following case. You have two people who have a dispute, and let's say again one of the people becomes chayiv in a shvua, but let's say the individual is chayiv to take the shvua. Is chashud ala shvua. He is a person who we are concerned will lie under oath. So we'll say in a situation where we are concerned that a person is going to lie under oath, we flip the shvua, and we have the other party take the shvua, and then the other party ultimately could then take the money that they are suing for. So the Gemara just says, Ketzad, what are examples where someone would be chashud, meaning what would a person have to do to be deemed chashud, suspect to swear falsely? Ketzad, echad shvua sa'idas. So also whether a person lied about a shvua sa'idas is, if I go over to someone and I say, I know you know testimony that will benefit me, and the person says, I don't know any testimony for you, and I make them swear, I make them take a shvua that they don't know any testimony, and they lie. They lie. It turns out that they did no testimony. That shvua seidos, vechad shvua sapikadon, or a shvua ultimately again that a person has a pikadon and he says he doesn't. Vafilu shvua shab, or for that matter, if a person just takes an oath in vain. If a person violated any of these oaths, this makes him a chashud ala shvua, and he would no longer be permitted to swear in beis din. Ve'emisa, Rav Sheshes, if you're correct, bikfiruhu de ifsalei. So I'll say, Rav Sheshes, if you're correct, then the truth is, as soon as someone is kofar ala pikadon, as soon as someone denies that he is in possession of a pikadon, even without a shvua, that should make him puzzle to go out and take a shvua. Because remember, what did Rav Sheshes just say before? Rav Sheshes said before that once you deny that you have the pikadon, then what? Then lamaisa you're chayiv on onsin, which means that you are considered to be a ganav ready from then. If that's the case, even denial of a pikadon without a shvua should make you chashid ala shvua. To which the Gemara says, Amri hachim askina. What's the case? The kai ba'agam. But also the case over here when he denies the pikadon is where the animal is in a swamp. So also listen to this. In other words, what the Gemara is going to suggest over here is that the only case where Rav Sheshes says that if you deny the existence of the pikadon, that you're considered to be a gazlan right now, is when the object is with you. But if the object is not with you, you're not considered to be a gazlan. You're considered to be what? Buying time. That sometimes people make up stories in order to buy themselves a little bit more time in which to go ahead and return the object, but their intention is not to steal. Their intention is, again, just they need a little bit more time to be able to deliver the object. So the Gemara says, Delav kfiruhu. The savar ishtamit lanai ad azilna umaisina lay. I just need a little bit more time until I can go ahead and retrieve the animal and deliver it to the owner. Teda, because we'll say after all we have such a similar concept. If somebody, this is actually very interesting. This is more complicated what the Gemara is going to make it over here. But if a person goes ahead, I lend Ruvain money, and then what happens? I come to Ruvain for repayment, and Ruvain says, I don't owe you any money. I don't owe you any money. And then Lamaisa, again, witnesses come and testify about the fact that Reuven does owe me money. The halacha is kasher le'edus. We do not consider to be Reuven. We don't consider Reuven to be a liar. He's still going to be kasher le'edus. Why, Rabosai? Because at the end of the day, we assume that he's denying it in order to buy himself more time in order to go ahead and pay me back. On the other hand, top of Kovav, the pikadon pasal le'edus. Rabosai, if he denies the existence ultimately of a pikadon, then he's going to be pasal le'edus. Why? We'll say, what's the distinction? Because since milvalotza nitna, so ultimately alone, that money is supposed to be used. So we understand that money is not in existence. So because it's not in existence, the borrower may make up a story in order to buy himself more time for repayment. Pikadon, on the other hand, is in existence. And if he lies about it, he's lying about it only for one reason, and that is because he wants to steal it. But Ilfa said, Shvua Kona. Shvua Kona. So we'll say, look at Rashi for just a moment. Shvuhi. Look at Rashi. Shvua Kona. So we'll say, but yet, Ilfa said, Shvua Kona. That when moment that a person takes a shvua, they're kona. Now, what does that mean? Shvua hi dekanyo, aval kfira lo kanyo. So we'll say, so what that sounds like is the following: that as soon as a person takes a false oath regarding an object, he's been kona that object for onsim. In other words, he now becomes responsible for the onsim of the object that he swore about. So the Gemara infers from here, it's only after he takes a shvua, but not simply after he denies that he has it. To which the Gemara says, "Hachanami dikayim ba'agam." We're talking over here again about a case where the object is in the swamp, the object is not with him. Therefore, the fact that he's denying it is just simply to give himself more time. The other possibility is, "My shvua kona." What does it mean? That after you take a false oath, you acquire responsibility over the item. Kid Rav Huna. Dam Rav Huna Amar Rav, because Rav Huna said to Rav, Mana li biyadeh, Chavala Omer ein lecha biyadi. But listen to this. I go over to Ruvain and I say to Ruvain, you have a mana of mine in your hand. And Ruvain says, I've got nothing of yours. Vinishba, and Ruvain swears that he has none of my money. Va'achakach ba'o eidim. Rabbi said, this is wild. And then afterwards, witnesses come and testify to the fact that I lent Ruvain money. So what's the halacha? Pater. Rabbi say, Ruvain ultimately again is going to be pater from repayment. Why is he pater from repayment? Shene'emar velakach ba'alav velo yishalem. The owner shall take, and the litigant shall not, the defendant shall not pay. Kevan shekiblu abaylim shvua shuv ein mishalim mamon. Rabbi said this is a wild halacha. Essentially, the halacha says, Rav seems to say that when you have a legal dispute with someone, so you have a choice. You could either try to exact repayment or you can get shvua. But the issue with shvua is that once the defendant swears, then what? Case closed. Case closed. And that even if witnesses come along and go ahead and then testify about the fact that Reuven does have my money, the case is closed once the shvua is taken. Now granted, it could become clear that Reuven is a liar and took a false oath, but Lamais, again, what Rav seems to say is, you have one shot at the defendant. You have a choice. You could go the shvua route, or you could go the repayment route. But Lamais, if you go the shvua route, once that shvua is taken, the case is closed. A fascinating idea. So we're going to analyze this. Gufa, Amrafun Amrav. So let's go back and analyze this a little bit. So first the name of Rav. I go to Reuven, you have my money. Reuven says, no, I don't. The Nishba, and Reuven swears that he does not have the money. And what happens? Ubo Edim, and Edim then come and testify that Reuven does have my money. Potter. Reuven does not have to pay back. Why? The owner shall take it and the defendant shall not pay. Once the owners have received the shvua, shuv ein mishalmin mamon. The litigant or the defendant is no longer obligated to pay money. So Amar Rava, so let's qualify this. So I understand Rav's statement in a case of a loan. You understand, when we've seen this phrase before, which means when you lend someone money, that money becomes the property of the borrower. Right? What's the proof to that? The proof to that is that the borrower need not repay the same funds that you gave them. Right? So I gave someone a stack of gold coins, I gave them $1,000 of gold coins, so they don't have to pay me back those same gold coins. They have to pay back $1,000. That's milva hotzah nitna. The milva alone becomes the property of the borrower. Look at Rashi. Dolo hotzah nitna, ubaya tashlumin, ve'ika lemeimar de b'shvua eftar lemi tashlumin ki b'chsiv lo yishan. Rabbi saying, so Rabbi says the logic is like this. So I lend Ruvain money. I lend Ruvain $1,000. Say, Ruvain, time to pay. Ruvain says, I don't know which time, I never borrowed any money from you. I say, really? Take a shvua that you never borrowed any money from me. So Rabbi says the dynamic is like this. When I impose a shvua, or Bezin impose a shvua on Ruvain, what I, the lender, am agreeing to is that if Ruvain does take the shvua, I drop my claim. Meaning that's the mechanics over here. If you take the shvua, meaning, because there has to be like a quid pro quo, meaning if Reuben agrees to take the shvua, there has to be some reciprocity on my part. So if he's going to take the shvua, the understanding is you take each and I agree to drop the claim. That's why Rava says, or Rav Huna says, or Rav says, that if Reuben takes the shvua, and then what happens? Witnesses come afterwards and say Reuben really did borrow money, then what? Reuben doesn't have to repay. Why? Because I effectively have dropped the claim against Ruvain. So Rava just says, this logic is a fascinating case. Rava says this logic only applies in a case of a loan. Because why? Because ultimately the loan becomes the property of the borrower. But when it comes to a pikadon never leaves the reshus ultimately of its original owner. Rashi says over here, so I understand in a case of a loan where the borrower acquires the money, I understand why that once he takes a shvua, I release my claim. Pikadon, however, never leaves the possession of the original owner. Therefore, again, technically speaking, says Rav, even if Reuven swears that he doesn't have the pikadon, if witnesses come later on and say he does have the pikadon, I have the right to get it back. So the Gemara says, V'halokim, Amarav, but 1 second, but by God, Rav said, Afidu pikadon. It's not true. Rav said his halacha even by pikadon. Rabbi said that even if Reuven swears that he doesn't have the pikadon, and witnesses come later on and say he does have the pikadon, that lamaisa again, once Reuven swears, I drop my claim and cannot get any repayments from Reuven. After all, again, dechik sivkra, because after all, the pasuk that we quoted before is actually talking about pikadon. Yasser Rav Nachman in the Kamma Hashmaita. So Rav Nachman was sitting and saying over this ruling. Rav Nachman. So I'll say so Rav Acha Bar Min Yomi raised the kasha to Rav Nachman. So we'll say so. Remember again. Fine. Raise the question to Rav Nachman. Okay, so the Gemara says, Heichan pikdoni. So listen to this. I come to Ruvain, I say, Ruvain, where is my pikadon? Where I deposited an object with you. Where is it? Amarle Avad. He says, I'm so sorry, it got lost. Mashbi'acha ani. Okay, swear to me that you lost it. Va'amar amen. And Ruvain says amen, which is a form of shua. Va'idim mi'idin oso sha'achlo. But then witnesses come along and say that's what? That we saw Ruvain consume the pikadon. So what's the halacha? Mishale mesakeren. He has to go ahead and pay back the principal. Holda me'atzmo. But we'll say if he admitted, after Reuven swore falsely, if he admitted on his own that he swore falsely, then mishalim keren v'chomesh v'asham. He has to pay back the keren, the chomesh, and the asham. We'll say now what's the kash over here? What do you see from here? This is even post shvua. Now remember, we just got finished saying that post shvua, especially with a pikadon, especially with the pikadon, case closed. Right, that if you go ahead, I deposit a pikadon with Reuven gave back my pikadon, Reuven says, I don't have it, Reuven swears that he doesn't have the pikadon, then what? Then Lamaisa again, we're done yet, we see over here, that halacha Lamaisa again, he has to pay back, even post Shvuah, Amrli Rav Nachman, Hachamayas, what's the case? Kigon Shenishba Chutz LeBezin. Oh, so we'll say, the Gemara is going to suggest the following. When does a Shvuah close the case? Only when the Shvuah is administered in Beis Din. But in this case over here, the shvua was administered outside of Beis Din. Amrle, is that true? Amrle ihachi ema seifa heichan pikdoni. But yeah, look at the seifa of that brisa. I say to Reuven, where is my pikadon? Amarlo nignav. So Reuven says to me, it was stolen. Mashbi'acha ani. I say to Reuven, okay, I make you take an oath. Va'amar amen. And Reuven says amen. Va'idim idin oso sheganvo. And the idim come along and say that no, he stole it. Mishalim tashlumi kefel. He has to pay kefel. Hoda me'atzmo, if he admitted on his own, Mishayim Tashlumi Karen v'chomesh v'asham. V'sakadai tochutz the Bezdin. Rabbi say, if you want to say this is all taking place outside of Bezdin, mi'ika kefel. Rabbi say, kefel is a Bezdin administered punishment. If this whole case is taking place outside of Bezdin, then how was there any kind of kefel? So let's listen to this. This is very interesting. I could give you an answer, very simple answer. Reisha chutz lebezdin, b'seifa bebezdin. That the Reisha is talking about a case where the case was adjudicated in Bezdin, and the Seifa is talking about a case where it was adjudicated outside of Bezdin. Mihu shinuya decheka lo mishaneinu lacha. But I don't want to give you forced answers. Well, there's an incredible musar over here that sometimes again we feel compelled to give an answer, and therefore again we give answers that are a bit shver. So here the Gemara is saying, you know what? I can give you a shver answer, but I'd rather not. Instead, what I'm going to tell you is the following: Idi v'idi bebezdin. Both the Reish and the Sefer are taking place in Bezdin. Below Kashan, I will say there is no contradiction. Kan b'kafatz, kan b'shalo kafatz. So I will say the case of kafatz is where the plaintiff goes ahead and administers the shvuah to the defendant on his own. So here Rashi brings down Kevan Shelo Haya Shvuas Bezdin. So I will say, in a case where ultimately again the plaintiff went ahead and adjured the defendant outside of Bezdin, even though he took a shvuah, because that was a shvuah outside of Bezdin, if he's subsequently found to be guilty, he will have to pay. However, if the shvuah was administered in Bezdin, then indeed the halacha is like Rav, who says what Rabbi was saying, that once a shvuah is administered in Bezdin, then what? Case is closed. So that's the distinction that the Gemara is now making. So again, just to follow this. So we have Rav, just to follow the progression. So we have Rav who says that if a person ultimately again denies a claim, takes a shvuah supporting his denial, then even if Eidim come along afterwards and say that he lied, Lamaisa, again, he's not financially liable. Why? Because Lamaisa, again, case is closed once the shvuah is done. Wait a machlokes. Everyone will agree this applies in a case of Hava. Does it apply in a case of Pikadon? It seems to be it will apply in a case of Pikadon as well. Now, a further distinction the Gemara is making, but when does Shvuah create a case closed reality, or when does the Shvuah close the case? That's only when? With a Shvuah administered in Bezdin. But a Shvuah administered outside of Bezdin will not go ahead and close the case. Amalei Rai Bar Chambal Nachman, Shram Chambal says Rav Nachman, Michti Dirav Lo Svir Lecha, Mashchuni Nafshcha. Listen to this. Shram Chambal says Rav Nachman, I don't understand. You don't hold like Rav. Why are you exerting yourself? Why are you being Moser Nefesh to support Rav's position? In other words, Rav Nachman is trying to go ahead and prove Rav's position, yet we know Rav Nachman does not hold of Rav. So Rav Nachman, why all the Mesiras Nefesh for a shita that you don't hold? Like, Amarle leperushe de Rav. Because Rav Nachman said, I still have to explain Rav's shita. The Rav Hachi metaretz le'lemas nisim, because this is how Rav understands the Mishnah. Rav said an incredible musar said Rav Nachman is essentially saying, look, just because I don't agree with it doesn't mean that Rav may not be correct. I don't think Rav is correct, but lemais again we owe it. So we'll say this is what happens when a person is mevakish. Everybody wants MS. Just most of us are only concerned with our version of MS, right? I know what the MS is. So I'm going to tell you what the MS is, that's going to perpetuate. But there are some people that are truly mevakshe MS, and understand that this is the way I hold, but it may not be the final say. And therefore, the Ma'aseh of Nachman says, at the end of the day, there is a position of Rav, and so I have to try to figure out what is the MS of Rav's shita. V'ha Rav, Kra Kamma, both say, but I don't understand, but Rav really bases his entire shita on a pasuk. Amri Kra, l'chol hanishboin, shebator nishboin, v'lo mishamenu da'asa. Both say, that pasuk that Rav quoted before really teaches me that what? That any time that a shvuah is taken, so ultimately again there is no payment. So we'll say in other words that shvuah frees one from payment. V'lakach ba'alav v'lo yishalim. So we'll say, so what does this teach? It says v'lakach ba'alav v'lo yishalim, that the owner will take it, and therefore again the defendant will not pay. Misha alav l'shalim hu nishbar. It also teaches us that the one who has to pay technically is the one who also takes the shvuah. So it teaches us that the defendant, the one who would have to pay, would also be the one who would have to take the shvuah. Maser Rav Hamura is a kasha hishpi alav chamisha pamim. panim, be mifnei bezin, men shel b'fnei bezin, v'kafra alav, chayiv akol achas v'achas. Well, it's an interesting case. I go to Reuven and I make Reuven swear about the same thing. The same thing 5 different times. The same claim 5 times. And Abba say he lies 5 times. What's the halacha? He's going to be chayiv for each and every false oath. What's the reason why he's chayiv on each and every one? Because Abba say in between each one he has the ability to go ahead and admit his liability. So we'll say, listen to this. So, but here, right, Lamaisa again. So you can't say that this is a case of kafats, right? This can't be a case of where the plaintiff adjured the defendant, because after all it says hishbiya alav, an oath was placed upon him, which sounds like Bezdin is doing this. Chutz the Bezdin lo matis amrit. You can't set this up as a case of outside of Bezdin. Why? It's because it says bifnei Bezdin katani, because that's happening in front of Bezdin. So we'll say, so what's the case? Who most of love whom mefarik? So he raised the question, he also answered it. So let's study. Let's study in katan. I will say you have to understand this case in pieces or in parts. Hishbiya alav. If he went ahead and he placed an oath upon him, chutz lebezdin. That's talking about a case of an oath that was imposed ultimately upon the defendant by the plaintiff outside of Bezdin. Hishbiya alav, that's talking about a case where Bezdin imposed an oath upon him, but it was outside of Bezdin. Uba Bezdin, in the case of in Bezdin, ultimately was talking about kafats. But I will say the bottom line in both of those cases is that even after a shvuah, so remember now we have another distinction, that is, it sounds like if the shvuah was imposed in Bezdin, but ultimately again the plaintiff adjured him, or it was outside of Bezdin, even if it was done by Bezdin, Lamaisa again there could still be liability to pay even post shvuah. Massive Rav raised another kasha. Balabais ta'an tanas ganov bipikadon. So we'll say if the balabais, meaning if the person watching the Bikadon, Reuven's watching my Bikadon, and he claims that the Bikadon was stolen, V'nishpa, and he swears that the Bikadon was stolen, V'hoda, and then he admits that the Bikadon was not stolen, he consumed it, Uba Edim, so we'll say, now after Reuven admits that he lied under oath, and he has the Bikadon, what happens? Then Edim show up. Im ad shalo, Bo Edim Hoda. So I'll say if Reuven admitted before the witnesses came along, so Mishalim Karen v'chomesh v'asham. Then he pays Karen, chomesh, and asham. V'im Mishabo Edim Hoda. But if he admitted his liability only after the witnesses came, then Mishalim Tashlume Kefel v'asham. Then I will say ultimately again he pays Kefel and he brings a carbon asham. V'hacha chutz lebezin v'kafat. So let's listen to this. Now in this case, chutz lebezin v'kafat lo matis amrit. So we'll say in this case over here, you can't set this up as a case of where the shvuah is taking place outside of Bezdin. Nor can you set it up as a case of kafats, where the plaintiff goes ahead and adjures the defendant. Yet, kefal katani. Yet it says that you're chayiv in kefal. And normally we say that kefal only occurs, right? Why? Kefal we establish only occurs in Bezdin. So therefore, because he's chayiv to pay kefal, you can't set it up as a case of kapats. You can't set it up as a case of chutz lebezdin. And I will say, what do you see? That a person is going to be responsible for payment after shvuah. That's what we're looking at over here. So now we're talking about a shvuah that has to be administered in Bezdin, yet a person is going ahead and still paying. That's a contradiction, because we just said before that's what? Once a shvuah is administered in Bezdin, then what? Case closed, no further payment. To which the Gemara says, Allah Amarava, Kol holda loshna ta'an tanas avad, veloshna ta'an tanas ganov. So we'll say any time that the person admits liability, whether his taina is that it was lost, whether his taina was that it was stolen. So the Gemara says, Lo Amar Rav. In that case, Rabbi say again, Rav does not say in that case that if you swore you are pater from liability. In other words, Rabbi say any case where the defendant admits his liability, he will be obligated to pay even post shvuah. Because I will say the pasuk says he will admit his liability. Under those cases, Lamaisa again, he will be chayiv to go ahead and pay Karen and Chomish. Toin Tainas Ganov Uba Edim Nami Lo Amar Rav. So we'll say similarly, in a case where Reuven claims that the object was stolen, then witnesses came and testified to the fact that he lied. Rav also does not hold his position in that case. Why? Tahak Tashlumi Kefel, because again, remember in that because the Bryce tells you that he has to pay Kefel. Ki Kamma. So when does Rav say his case? Ki Gon Shetan Tainas Avad V'Nishba V'Lo Hodo Bo Edim. So we'll say in a case where, let's say, Reuven claims that the object was stolen, he swore and he did not admit his liability, and then witnesses came. That's when Rav would say, what? Once a shvua has been administered and Beis case is closed, and no further payment. So we'll say, so now we have another distinction. That even Rav, who says that once a person has sworn in Beis Din, case is closed, that's only true if what? Now, even if witnesses come, the case is still closed. But there's another exception. What's the other exception? If the defendant admits liability. If the defendant admits liability, the Eina Chinami, he will be obligated to pay, even post-Shvuah. Also, Rav Gamda v'Amr l'Shmaita kamid Rav Ashi. So Rav Gamda came along and said over this willing said Rav Ashi. Amr l'Hashta umar Rav Hamnuna tamidid Rav v'yada d'Amar Rav Hoda v'kamosif Hoda. So we'll say Rav Hamnuna, who was the Talmud of Rav, and he knew that Rav said that in a case where the defendant admits liability, will be chayiv even post Shavua, and yet again the Kamosiv holder, he brings up the case, the kasha, the case of where the individual admitted liability. Va'at amrit hoda lo amarav, and yet you're saying that in a case, ultimately again of where the defendant admitted his liability, that Rav will not hold his position. This is Rav Huna's problem. We'll say Amud Beis. Amrit bishlam anishba ki asu edin mechayiv amatu lahachim mechayiv lekarbon ashua basraisa hoil v'yachal lachzor olahodos. So Rav Hamnuna's problem was the following: in a case ultimately where I made Reuven swear 5 times about the same liability, when witnesses come, I understand why he'll be chayiv a carbon on the last shvuah. Why? Because he technically could have admitted his liability. But if you hold that even when witnesses come, it's not going to be pater. Is there such a case where ultimately, again, if witnesses were to come along, he would be pater, and we're going to go ahead and make him chayiv a carbon asham for the false oath, because he has the ability to admit his liability. He has not yet admitted his liability. Fine, so we'll say that was the kasha that Rav Hamnuna ultimately had on Rav. So we'll say where we end off on this sugya. So just to bring a little bit of closure to this. So where we end off on this sugya is the following: that again we actually the Rambam adopts the position of Rav that Eina Chinami, once a person takes an oath, that ultimately, again, the case is closed. So if I go to Reuven, and I say to Reuven, ultimately, Reuven, give me back my pikadon, give me back my halva, and Reuven says, I don't have it, and I say, swear to me, and Reuven swears, once an oath has been administered, the case is closed. Which means, even if witnesses come along and say, we know that Reuven has the pikadon, Reuven has the halva, nevertheless the case is closed. What's the logic of that? So the logic of it is that, again, remember, if somebody is going to take a shvuah comes in return for what? In return for a release from liability. So if Reuven is going to take the shvuah, the quid pro quo is I release him from liability, and that release of liability is absolute. Now I will say, obviously, if it turns out that Reuven is a liar and he does have my money, so then obviously, even though in Beis Din I can't assume for any more money, but certainly again, there is a mitzvah klape shmaya. There's certainly, again, what we'll call a spiritual mandate to return anything that does not belong to you. Again, I guess that goes back to our previous sugya of takanas hashavim. But lamaisa, again, we pass like this distinction of Rav. So far we have two important pieces of halacha today. We have Rav Sheshes, who teaches me that once I deny that I have an item in my possession, I become a gazlan and I'm chayav on onsin. We have the position of Rav that once the shomer takes a shvuah, case is closed and he is freed from future liability. Says the Gemara. If somebody claims a tiny kind of become. So again, I gave Reuven my object to watch. He claims that it was stolen. He pays kefil, right? He pays kefil. This is not a case of shvuah. He pays kefil. So we'll say, so if he went ahead and he slaughtered it and sold it, he pays Arba V'chamish, like we've learned earlier. So the Gemara says, why? Hoil v'ganav Meshayim Tashlumi Kefel, v'toin tainas ganav Meshayim Tashlumi Kefel. So we'll say, because what do we have over here? Just like a ganav pays Kefel, a regular thief pays Kefel, so too someone who goes ahead and claims that an object was stolen essentially has the same status as a ganav, and therefore pays Kefel. So too, Tavach Umachar Meshayim Tashlumi Arba V'chamisha. So too, just like if somebody were to slaughter and sell, would have to pay 4 and 5 times penalty payment. Aftoin tainas ganav pipikadom kishum Meshayim Tashlumi Kefel Tavach Umachar Tashlumi Arba V'chamisha. So we'll say, so too when somebody claims a tainas ganav, that he has to pay Shlumi Kefel, so too again if he claims Tavach Umachar, or if he's Tavach Umachar, he has to pay Arba V'chamish. So the Gemara essentially says that somebody who is towing tainas ganav is pretty much treated like the ganav himself. That just like again the ganav himself has to pay kefel, so too towing tainas ganav has to pay kefel. Somebody claims the object was stolen, and just like again if the ganav slaughtered it and sold it, he has to pay 4 and 5 times. So too again, if the person who went ahead and was towing tainas ganav slaughtered it or sold it, would also have to pay 4 and 5 times. To which the Gemara says, "Mad the ganav shekim shayim tashlomi kefel shelo b'shvua." But here's a distinction: a ganav himself has to pay kefel, even if what? Even if he never swore falsely. Tomar betoin tainas ganav she'im mashayim tashlumi kefel ela b'shvua. So we'll say, but remember again, if somebody claims, remember I gave the object to Ruvain. Ruvain is claiming the object was stolen. Ruvain only becomes chayiv in kefel when? Only after he swears falsely about the object. To which the Gemara says, Amri hekeshi. At the end of the day, Rabbosai, this is a hekesh. These two cases of ganav and towing tainas ganav are a hekesh. Hekesh means, Rashi points out, that they are juxtaposed in the Torah. Ve'ein meshivin al hekesha. And ultimately, again, you can't ask kashas on a hekesh. Because remember, a hekesh ultimately is one of the exegetical principles. So we'll say, once you're dealing with exegetical principles, then the mice, again, even if you have a logical argument, the logical argument does not hold water against the hekesh. So this makes sense if you hold what? So we'll say, so far remember, we have Rabbi Yochanan's statement that towing tainas ganav in a pikadon pays kefel, and if the towing tainas ganav, remember, that's Ruvain. Ruvain says he doesn't have my object. It turns out that he stole it. He has to pay kefel. And if Reuven went ahead and slaughtered it and sold it, he has to pay Arba V'chamisha. And the way we are arriving at that conclusion is because there's a hekesh, that ultimately, again, this section of Toin Tainas Ganav is juxtaposed to the section of the Ganav himself. That teaches me that all the laws that apply to the Ganav ultimately apply to the Toin Tainas Ganav as well. Even though the Toin Tainas Ganav case is a bit different, because he only becomes liable after a shvuah. So the Gemara says, so we'll say that makes sense. That one says one of the psukim is dealing with a ganav, and one of the psukim is talking about a tanas ganav. Elaman da'amar hai was the first wide line. Elaman da'amar hai im yimatzi haganav ve'im lo yimatzi tarveyo between tanas ganav ma'ikal meimar. But according to the opinion who says that both psukim of im yimatzi haganav ve'im lo yimatzi are both talking not about a ganav himself, but rather someone who is towing tanas ganav. What is there to say? Amri Ganov Haganov. So we'll say, because the fact that the Torah could have said Ganov, but instead says Haganov, teaches me both cases, that both the halachos of Ganov as well as Toin Tainas Ganov will both ultimately be the same. So we'll say, remember, all we're just trying to do over here is to say that halacha l'maisa, the laws of someone who claims an object was stolen. In other words, once you claim the object has been stolen, then what? And you swear to that effect, you essentially become what? You become the Ganav yourself, and therefore all the laws of Ganav apply to you. So the laws of Kefa will apply to you, and if you subsequently slaughter and steal it, the laws of Arba V'chamisha will apply to you as well. That's all we're doing. Eisei Reb Chiya bar Abba Rabbi Yochanan. Heichan Shori. Listen to this. Reb Chiya bar Abba is kasha to Rabbi Yochanan. What's the kasha? So Hechan come to Ruvain. Where is my ox that I gave you? Nignav. Ruvain says it was stolen. Mashbi achani. So I say, Ruvain, take a shvua that you don't have the ox. Va'amr amen. And Ruvain says, amen. Right? I take a shvua, I don't have your ox. Va'idim also sha'achlo. And the witnesses come along and say, that's what? We saw Ruvain had a big barbecue and he ate your ox. So what's talach? Ruvain has to pay kefal. I asks the Gemara v'ha. The Efshalik Zais Basar Below Shchita. Now, both say if the witnesses claim that Ruvain ate the ox, by definition, what does that mean? He also did. He shechted it. So both say both say you can't have a case. There's no such thing as the ability to eat a kazais meat without shchita, which means both say that's what that Ruvain not only stole the animal, but he also what? He also slaughtered it. So what should be the halacha? What should be the halacha? He should be chayiv in arba v'chamisha. Yet the Brisa doesn't say that. The Brisa just says that he's only chayiv and kefel. What about arba v'chamisha? They ketani mishlam tashlumi kefel. Tashlumi kefel. And tashlumi dalad v'helo. Yet the Brisa only says that he's chayiv and kefel. Doesn't say that he's chayiv dalad v'hei. That contradicts what we just said before. But remember, what did Rabbi Yochanan say? Rabbi Yochanan said that if you claim that an object that was entrusted with you was stolen, when in fact it turns out that's what? You stole it, you become like the ganav, which should then mean in this case, that's what? If you ate it, means you shechted it. If you shechted it, you shouldn't only be chayiv kefil. What should you be chayiv in? Arba v'chamisha dalatei. Yet the Brisa doesn't say that. It's contradiction of Rabbi Yochanan. To which the Gemara says, asking, what's the case? Kigon sha'achlan avela. Oh, okay, we'll say. So it could be that the case over here is where Ruvain the ganav also didn't shech the animal. He didn't shecht it. Right? He ate it as an avela. Now, the animal died. So the animal died on its own, and then Ruvain ate it. Or we could give a different answer where what? The animal is a treifa. As Rabbi say, that's what? He did shech the animal, but it turns out the animal was a treifa. And Rabbi say, we learned before that you are not chayiv dalid vehei. You're only chayiv dalid vehei if it was a proper shchita. If the shchita did not ultimately permit the animal, like in a case where the animal was a treifa, you're not chayiv, which the Gemara says, no, Reb Meir, from a shchita she'en ruya shema shchita. This Gemara is reflecting the view of Reb Meir, and Reb Meir holds that even a shchita that does not render the animal fit is still called a shchita. So even if the animal was a treifa, you should still be chayiv dalad v'hei. So I'll say, why don't you say it's a case of a ben pakua? I'll say, we'll get to this in Chulin, but very quickly, if you shecht a pregnant animal, and it turns out that you open up the animal and the little baby calf goes jumping out of the animal, the halacha is you can eat that calf without shchita. Because the uber, the child in utero, is permitted with the shchita of the mother. So why don't you say maybe this is a case of a ben pakua, where what Rabbi say, Ruvain the thief could have eaten the meat without what? Without proper shchita. Because this is Gemara reflects the view of Reb Meir. Reb Meir holds that even a ben pakor requires shchita. So we'll say, so why don't you go ahead and set up this case? It's talking about shamad b'din va'amrulo tsei tein lo. Say it's a case ultimately going to say where I brought Ruvain to Beis Din, and the Beis Din said to Ruvain, go pay back silver. You owe him money. So what's the halacha? Say daha amarava tsei tein lo. If Beis Din ordered the defendant to pay tavachu machar pater. So we'll say, interestingly enough, once Beis Din has ordered Ruvain to pay, to a certain degree, the case is closed. The case is closed. Judgment has been rendered. And if Ruvain were to subsequently go ahead and then shecht and slaughter and sell my animal, he would be parted from arba v'chamisha. My timer, what's the reason? Kevan de paskele milse v'tavachu machar have gazlan. Because Rabbi say, remember again, once Beis Din has ordered him to pay, the case is closed. And once the case is closed, Rabbi say, if he then goes ahead and slaughters and sells the animal, he's no longer a ganav. What is he called? He's called the gazlan. Because Rabbi say, what's talach? Remember, arba v'chamisha is only a din in a ganav, someone who steals secretly. But someone who steals in a brazen public fashion is called the gazlan. Dalad doesn't apply to that person. If Reuven were to go ahead and what? Slaughter and sell the animal after Beis Din told him, you have to pay, he's no longer a ganav, he's a gazlan. The gazlan m'shayim tashlam arba v'chamisha. So the Gemara says, however, but if Beis Din just said, look, you're going to have to go ahead and pay him, but Beis Din didn't render their final ruling, then v'tavachu machar, and Reuven then went ahead and slaughtered the animal, chayiv. Reuven will be chayiv arba v'chamisha. My taima, kol kamad lo psikale mil sakati ganafu. Because as long as Beis Din has not yet rendered their final verdict, he is still a ganav. So the Gemara says, so therefore again, I will say you could go ahead and set it up as a case. Ultimately, again, as you can set it up like this: You could alternatively also set it up as a case of a shutaf who went ahead and owned an animal jointly and slaughtered the animal without the consent of his friend, which we established not chai for arba v'chamisha elo chada mitrei utlas nakif. Rather, Abosai says the Gemara, the truth is there are a couple of different ways you could set up this case. The Gemara just happened to choose one of these approaches. So we'll stop over here for today, but just understand that we are ending a lot. I know. I threw a lot at you, but we'll say again, just remember 3 points. If you remember 3 points today, then this has been a successful daf. So the Gemara said, first of all, again, just remember this Rabbi Yochanan's last statement that if I entrust something with Ruvain, I entrust the pikadon. Once Ruvain denies that he has the pikadon, ultimately what? He becomes the ganav. And he becomes the ganav ultimately again in every way, which means that he's chayiv in kefal, and if he goes ahead and slaughters it and sells it, then what? He's chayiv arba v'chamisha. That's Rabbi Yochanan. We'll discuss Rabbi Yochanan more tomorrow. That's point number 1. Point number 2, Rabbi Yosef, was the statement of Rav. Rav said, Manali biyadecha. I entrusted money with Ruvain. Ruvain denies the money. He swears that he does not have the money. Once he swears, what's the halacha? Case closed. We're done. I release my claim. And point number 3 was Rav Sheshes. Rav Sheshes says that once you deny that you have, if I entrust Ruvain with an object, a pikadon, and Ruvain denies that he has the pikadon, once there is denial, even before Shavua, Ruvain becomes a gazlan, and once he becomes a gazlan, he is chayiv in all own sin that happened to the object. I will say those 3 points are the ikarim of today's daf. If you have that, then you can honestly say you've been kona daf kuf vav in Meseches Bava Kamma. Shkoyach. 3 points.